Welcome to my channel again. You are watching my YouTube channel Bachelor and Master English. This channel is dedicated to the teaching of language and literature courses, and especially focusing those students from non-native language countries. Okay, so here we are talking about a poem by Alfred Edward Houseman or A. Houseman. The title of the poem is 8 o'clock. In our today's discussion, we have introduction of the text. There will be paraphrase, summary, theme, and critical appreciation. I am sure you will accompany me till the end of this video. Again, as in other videos, I request my viewers to subscribe my channel and drop a like and share the video among your friends and fellows. So today I also continue the same job. I again plead you to subscribe my channel and share my videos. Please, you have anything to say, drop your ideas in my comment box. I have been trying my level best to address them timely. Today let us go with our discussion. Here is introduction of the poem. The title of the poem is 8 o'clock. The poet is British poet A. Houseman. The language the poem was written in English and it was published in 1928. The genre is poetry. The tone is remorseful, bitter. The theme is power of time, control of life and death. The diction here is gentle, tough and strong. Rhyme scheme is A B A B C D C D, and this rhyme scheme is designed in such a way that it flows with the time, it flows like time with the ringing of the bell, and we have alliteration and the repetition of consonant sounds in a line of poetry repeated here. And personification, here is this clock is personified as human character. The range of images that we have seen in the poem is man and clock relationship. Okay, so let us go with the paraphrase. A man stood and heard the church tower clock beating every quarter of hour on the morning town. The beating sound spread to the marketplace and people equally, as he was poor man of having no money. He counted the beating and passing hour, then he cursed his luck of poverty. The clock collected its strength and struck the time 8 o'clock. The striking was hard beating on his fate. Okay, here is a poem. He stood and heard the steeple sprinkle the quarters on the morning town. 1, 2, 3, 4, to marketplace and people. It tossed them down. Strapped noose neighing his hour, he stood and counted them and cursed his luck. And then the clock collected in the tower its strength and struck. This is the poem, and we have the summary of the poem here. 8 o'clock starts up by introducing a man, he may be a protagonist here, who hears the bell of church tower each 15 minutes. It is also heard throughout the marketplace and by other townspeople. Each time the clock rings, the man knows that his death is getting nearer and nearer. The hour is quite near against his desire. The man has a heart's attitude to the hour that is approaching. The power of time is shown when the clock finally strikes. He there stands and counts the quarter strike. The speaker identifies two main things, man and clock, which represents a relationship. Okay, this is the summary. Now let us go with the discussion of the text in Nepali. यो 8 बजे 8 बजे शीर्षकको कविता बेलायती कवि यही हाउसम्यानको एउटा चर्चित कविता हो। यसमा यहाँ के भन्छ भने एउटा मान्छे छ, त्यो मान्छे गरिब छ अनि उसको हातमा आफ्नो घडी पनि छैन र समय कति गयो भनेर बताउने कुनै यन्त्र पनि छैन। अनि उसको एउटा विकल्प भनेको के हुन्छ त भन्दाखेरि त्यहाँ गिर्जाघरको घडीले कति पटक बजाउँछ अनि कति घन्टी बजाउँछ, त्यही आधारमा उसले त्यहाँको आफ्नो समय थाहा पाउने हो। अनि त्यो घडीले फेरि के गर्थ्यो भने 15 मिनटमा 1, आधी घन्टामा 2 अनि पौने घन्टामा 3 गरेर अनि यसरी घन्टी बजाउँथ्यो। अब भनेको के हो भन्दा 1 घन्टामा 4 पटक बज्ने भयो भने उसले 15-15 मिनटको पल छुट्याएको थियो। त्यसरी घडी सुन्थ्यो त्यसले। अनि त्यो आवाज उसले सुन्यो। अब सुनेपछि चाहिँ अब आफ्नो नियति भोग्नुपर्ने दिन त्यही रहेछ, कुन दिनको कति गतेको हैन, कुन तिथिको हो, तर चाहिँ त्यो दिनको 8 बजे बिहान उसको चाहिँ एउटा नियति भोग्ने दिन छ। सायद उसले मृत्युदण्ड भोग्ने होला अथवा कुनै त्यस्तो खालको चाहिँ जिन्दगीमा उसले असहन नभएको त्यस्तो खालको चाहिँ सजाय भोग्नुपर्ने अनुभूति गर्नुपर्ने दिन होला। त्यही भएर त्यो घडीको चाहिँ पल पल उसले छल्न खोज्छ तर सम्भव छैन। अझ त्यो 8 बजेको घन्टी त यति कडासँग बज्छ, मुटुका चाहिँ यी सबै भित्री अङ्गका सबै ठाउँमा झरझर झरझर झनन्न झनन्न गरे जस्तो हुन्छ। अनि त्यो एउटा त्यो घडीले अथवा घन्टाले चाहिँ बल पटुलेर चाहिँ समय ठोक्दाखेरि 8 बज्दाखेरि त्यो उसको भाग्यमाथिको हिर्काइ, भाग्यलाई हिर्काए जस्तो उसले महसुस गर्छ। पैसा र सम्पत्ति नभएको त्यो मानिस हैन, घडीको त्यो एउटा चाहिँ घन्टाघरको घडीको आवाज बटुलेर समय आवाज बटुलेर भने कति बज्यो भनेर चाहिँ जानकारी लिने मान्छेले अब समयको कुरा नै गरे आउनुपर्छ। तर यो कवितामा के गर्न खोजेको छ भने कविले छोटो कविता हो हैन, तर त्यति छोटो कवितामा यति चाहिँ भाव व्यक्त गर्न खोजेको छ। एकदम चाहिँ उनले एउटा समयको शक्ति र समयको पन्जाभित्र परेको कुनै पनि चिज फुत्कन गाह्रो हुन्छ। समय कहिल्यै अन्त नहुने प्रक्रिया हो। संसारको कुनै पनि वस्तु वा प्राणी सदाको लागि यहाँ बाँच्दैन र जीवित पनि रहँदैन। यहाँ सधैँको लागि रहने भनेर आएको पनि होइन। यो मानव जीवन नै यस्तो हो जसले नियति भोग्नुपर्छ, त्यहाँ विकल्पै छैन। नियति नभोग्ने हो भने मान्छेको जीवन चाहिँ सफल जीवन बन्दैन। यहाँ प्रत्येकले भोग्नुपर्छ नियति। मृत्युको सामना गर्न र त्यसको सङ्घारमा उभिएको एउटा मान्छेको प्रत्येक पल कसरी बित्छ होला, उसले के सोच्छ होला भन्ने कुराको भाव यस कवितामा व्यक्त गरेको पाइन्छ। खास चाहिँ के छ भन्दै अब मृत्यु कुरेको मान्छेले अथवा चाहिँ एउटा नियति भोग्न कुरेको मान्छेले समय कसरी बिताउँछ होला, उसको चाहिँ प्रत्येक पल पल कसरी चाहिँ उसले बिताउँछ होला त, त्यो बिताउन होला त बिताउँछ होला त भन्ने कुरा सुन्नको लागि चाहिँ हामीले यो अर्को एउटा कविता पनि चर्चा गरिसकेका छौँ। त्यो अन द इभ अफ एक्जिक्युसन भन्ने त्यो कविता छ। अनि अन्य कविताहरू पनि अब यो 8 बजे यो त्यस्तै खाले कविता हो। यहाँ चाहिँ समयको एउटा पाबन्दी र समयको शक्ति अनि सँगसँगै मान्छेको र यो घडीको सम्बन्ध, मान्छे र घडीको सम्बन्धलाई पनि यहाँ चाहिँ प्रकाश पारेको छ। अब यहाँ चाहिँ अलि अनुप्रासहरू प्रयोग गरेको छ कविले। अनुप्रासहरू प्रयोग गरेर कवितामा एउटा साङ्गीतिकता अथवा चाहिँ गत्यात्मकता चाहिँ सिर्जना गर्न खोजेको छ। अनि त्यो यहाँ प्रयोग भएको एउटा जुन एउटा अनुप्रासको एउटा ढाँचा छ अन्त्यानुप्रास, त्यो त्यसमा के छ त भन्दाखेरि क ख ग घ ग घ अथवा एबी सिडी भनेपछि यहाँ 8 हरफमा लेखिएको यस कवितामा अथवा 8 हरफमा रचिएको यस कवितामा जुन एउटा चाहिँ खालको चाहिँ अन्त्य अनुप्रास चाहिँ अन्त्यानुप्रासको चाहिँ एउटा राखिया छ त्यसले चाहिँ समयको प्रवाहसँगै गएको देखिन्छ। अनि कवितामा यो घडीलाई मानवीय चरित्र प्रदान गरिएको छ। यहाँ प्रयोग हुने भएको बिम्ब भनेको मान्छे र त्यो घडीसँगको सम्बन्ध हो। जस घडी भनेको समय हो र मान्छे भनेको त्यो समय भोग्ने एउटा प्राणी हो। त्यो समयलाई वास्तविक रूपमा बुझेर भोग्ने प्राणी हो र समय कतिको महत्त्व हुन्छ, कति बलवान हुन्छ, कति शक्तिशाली हुन्छ र त्यो समयको चाहिँ पन्जामा परेपछि मान्छेले के गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ यहाँ उसले बुझ्ने भएको हुनाले यो कवितामा समयलाई शक्तिशाली रूपमा प्रस्तुत गरिएको छ। यसको चाहिँ मुख्य एउटा भाव पनि समय नै हो। यसको मुख्य भाव के छ त भन्दाखेरि कविले चाहिँ यहाँ एउटा नाटकीय रूपमा यो नाम नभएको एउटा चाहिँ पुरुष कैदी जुन एउटा मृत्युको ढोकामा चाहिँ उभिरहेछ अनि उसले अब आफ्नो मृत्यु अथवा चाहिँ एउटा अन्तिम नियति भोग्नको लागि चाहिँ कुरेको जुन समय छ र त्यो उसको नियति भोग्नलाई अथवा मृत्युदण्ड भोग्नलाई कुरेको समयमा को बिचमा उसको मनमा चल्ने भाव तरङ्गहरू र प्रत्येक पल पलको कुरालाई चाहिँ यो घडी र अनि त्यो घण्टाघरको घडी र अनि मनको चाहिँ यहाँका चाहिँ भावभङ्गीहरू ती उसले त त्यहाँ बजेका प्रत्येक घन्टीलाई चाहिँ आफ्नो मुटुमा घन्टी बजेको चाहिँ ठानिरहेछ। एकदम उसको जिन्दगीको चाहिँ घन्टी बजेको उसले ठानिरहेछ। त्यस्तो खालको चाहिँ कविता हो जो समयको महत्त्व र समयको शक्तिलाई चाहिँ कसैले पनि कम आँक्नु हुँदैन। समय भनेको त्यस्तो हो। उसले त्यहाँ तोकिएपछि त्यो समयमा त्यो बेलामा ऊ आउँछ। यो कहिले अन्त नहुने प्रक्रिया भएको हुनाले आउँछ र आफ्नो जे गर्नुपर्ने त्यो सबै गरेर जान्छ। अरूले केही गर्न सक्दैन। समयलाई कसैले रोक्न पनि सक्दैन, कसैले चाहिँ आफ्नो बसमा पनि राख्न सक्दैन। समय यसरी बगेको हुन्छ। हामी त्यही अनुसार बग्न सिक्यौँ भने हाम्रो सफल हुन सक्छौँ र समयको विरुद्धमा हामी गयौँ भने हामी असफल हुन्छौँ। अब तर शीघ्रै जाँदाखेरि पनि हामी अलिकति सावधान भएर आफ्ना राम्रा कामहरू गर्ने, खराब कामहरू नगरिकन समयको शक्तिलाई चाहिँ एउटा स्वीकार गर्ने। जसरी बर्ट्रान्ड रसलले आफ्नो फ्री म्यान्स वर्शिप भन्ने निबन्धमा मृत्युलाई, समयलाई अनि प्रकृतिलाई यी तीनटा चिजहरूलाई चाहिँ सहनुपर्छ। यिनीहरूको शक्तिलाई चाहिँ स्वीकार गर्नुपर्छ र तिनीहरूको शक्तिलाई स्वीकारेर अनि त्यही अनुसारको व्यवस्थापन गरेर आफू अगाडि बढियो भने एउटा स्वतन्त्र मान्छेले सफल जीवन जिउन सक्छ भनेका छन्। यहाँ पनि यही हाउसम्यानले समयलाई चाहिँ अब कसैले पनि कम नआक्नु, समय यति शक्तिशाली हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा बताउन खोजेँ। ओके, हियर वी गो विथ द थीम. The theme of the poem is striking of the protagonist to death by the hand of time. The time is a never-ending process. The time is a never-ending process. Nothing in the world exists forever. Everything falls into the cruel grip of time and melts forever. Time is emphasized several times in the poem, showing just how close to death the man is. It is about the feeling of the person who is going to face the execution. He lives every second restlessly, being conscious of every moment. It's human nature to face the nature. The clock beating the quarters recounts his attitude. The poet embeds the theme through the dramatic situation in which an unnamed male prisoner is standing presumably on a scaffold and awaiting to be executed when the clock in the nearby church steeple tolls 8. Now let's go with the critical appreciation. The poem makes a series of questions. What happens when the church bell tolls your final hour? Does your party dress turn into rags and your beautiful carriage revert back into pumpkin? What do you do when your last 60 minutes are up? Many people pray to their God for salvation, and many others wish to go back and correct the wrongs in their lives. The man in the poem is on the death row, and rather than repenting and hoping for forgiveness from on high, he laments his fate and angrily awaits his doom. The man curses his luck of being a mortal man. The time gathers its maximum strength when it strikes human beings. 8 o'clock in the morning was his time to strike. It is a rhymed poem with classical restraint of emotion. The word struck signifies the striking sound of the clock, and it also means the striking of the protagonist to death by the hand of time. The poem is a really good example of sound as meaning. The sound echoes the sense in the poem. If we read it out loud, we can hear the gradual increase of stress. It gets more and more tense as it further and further. The third line of the poem is example of escalating tension as the poet starts to count the hours in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4 to marketplace and people. It tosses them down. The line before that only sprinkles the quarters of the hour. So we are heading towards or heading forward closer and closer to some ultimate fate. The poem might be trying to tell us the feeling of the person who is going to face a terrible thing. At that moment, he is so much conscious of time. To him, every second is important. He lives every second restlessly, being conscious of every moment. He may be going to be hanged, or he may be undergoing a terrible experience. Rather than accepting his fate, the man sits and curses it. Instead, to accept what is happening to him would be to admit that what he did deserve his fate was wrong, that he was truly guilty of sin. To feel that guilt, to repent for what he had done, would be to ask forgiveness, which in all rights is a smarter path to follow. Yet, for some reason, the man asks not for forgiveness, but for wrath of God. The man does this because it mostly likely he has committed no actual crime. His fate is not deserving of the punishment bestowed upon him. Houseman's 8 o'clock is an alliterative poem. The poem moves rhythmically towards the climax. It is a rhymed poem with classical restraint of emotion, with chosen symbols and phrases. The second stanza starts with strapped nose, noose, nine is hour. It sounds as if he is strapped, and the pedal hour 8 o'clock, I assume, is drawing nigh. The line feels as though he no longer has any more control over his travels over his earth, and the fact that he curses his luck must mean he got caught doing something that caused him all of his pain. The countdown speeds the poem along, but then at the final line, the clock collects its strength in the tower and strikes. And when you read it aloud, note how final that caw sounds is. Notice how mouth cannot further, you are done. And when the clock collects in the tower, its strength and struck, he is in trouble. In the poem, we find Houseman looking at dark side of life and muffled sadness and melancholy. Here, the protagonist is directly confronted with the consciousness of the running time when he is in the form of the tower. The man in the poem on death's row, and rather than repenting and hoping for forgiveness from one high, he laments his fate and angrily awaits his doom. The narrator, the speaker, or the protagonist here, he curses his luck because something unpleasant and unavoidable is about to happen after the clock strikes 8. We find the alliteration in the poem very effective, good use of alliteration. Good, stood, steeple, noose, neighing, counted, cursed, clock, collected, strength, struck. In the first line, the alliteration reminds us of the steeple standing. In the fifth line, it suggests the neighing hour being noosed. The tickling effect of the clock is clear in the clock collected. The final one suggests strong strike. After reading this poem, I identified myself with the protagonist. In the examination hall of my bachelor level, the answer books or answer sheets were distributed 15 minutes earlier, and I was waiting for the question to come as soon as the bell rings. 7, or at 7 o'clock the bell rings, and when the invigilator distributes the answer in question paper, I count every second, and when the bell rings, I get the question paper. Okay. And with this discussion, I have come to the end of my today's class. How did you get it? I am sure you had no problem in getting my ideas. If you have anything to share, please put your ideas in my comment box. I shall try my level best to deal with them. Thank you very much for your time and patience.